Scout LaRue just wants you guys to know that, and she wants you guys to do your homework and your research and learn about what credible studies are. Because Scout LaRue wouldn't believe a study with only 2 sources, especially when her owner has to have way more sources than that in her student research papers.
I've seen this road 1,000 times. I've got no roots, but my home was never on the ground. I've got no roots, but my home was never on the ground.
So I know that I said I wasn't going to be doing a response video to that bit video by Raleigh that everyone has been asking me to do a response to, and I'm not going to do one in the sense that I'm not going to do another bit video with all my sources and stuff, because I feel that my previous bit video covers everything that it needed to. So for anyone who hasn't watched it, I'm going to link it down below. However, there are a couple things I did want to go over because I've been thinking a lot about this whole thing, and there is a lot of hypocrisy on both sides, I'd say, because there's people who just, like, I feel like for a large part of this whole bitless versus bitted debate, people are just saying whatever they need to make their side look better, and they're going out of their way to find things wrong with the other side, and it's making it not as accurate and well thought out as it could be, because people are just pointing fingers and I don't like it. So I just wanted to point out some things that I was thinking of that I find concerning. So first of all, I just wanted to show you guys the bit that I used. It's a little chewed up, so I'm gonna need to replace it soon. But this is a rubber Eco-Pure egg butt from Centaur Bits, and as you can see, it's a double broken bit, which means with that bit video that a lot of people cite the effects of the bit and it shows it poking the roof of their mouth, this bit can physically not do that. It breaks. So it'll lay flat and it can't tent like single jointed bits can. Like this one can tent like so. Mine can't do that. It breaks. So that's one of the bits that I use the most, and my other one is a mullen mouth, not this one, this one's not mine, but as you can see, this bit also cannot tent and poke the roof of the mouth like people claim. I only ride my horses in rubber bits as of right now. Both of them are like this really nice soft rubber, not the plasticky rubber that Happy Mouth uses. Basically, people citing that effects of the bit video as like a reason for why all bits are bad. It's highly inaccurate because not all bits are set up that way. It focuses on only one type of bit, and there's tons and tons of different mouthpieces. So using that as an argument against all bits is stupid and poorly thought out. And also another thing that I wanted to point out is that a lot of people are more focused on finding problems with horses when they're bitted if they're anti-bit. For example, if a horse swishes their tail, throws their head, spooks, bucks, or does anything, people will blame it on the bit. For example, in one of my videos when Milo's younger, he bucks on the lunge line, and he's bucking because he's excited. And I have numerous videos of him doing the exact same things, both bitted and bitless. But when he does it bitless, people say, oh, he's only doing that because of the bit, despite the evidence that shows that he does it regardless. So people are focusing on behaviors that they only care about when a horse is bitless. Milo recently decided that he just simply does not like one of the halters that I was using on him. It's a regular nylon halter. It's one he used to wear when he was a baby. It's a breakaway halter, and he just doesn't like it. He'll throw his head and he doesn't want it anywhere near him. He goes like this. He's like, nope, nope, nope. And he'll back away and act like he's so afraid of this halter, and it's bitless. For his bridle, he drops his head right away and puts his face into the bridle. But if he were doing the same thing that he does with the halter with the bridle, people would be like, oh, it's because of the bit. So all of these things are things that people only focus on when it serves their purposes and when they think that it'll fuel their anti-bit argument. And I think that is not fair. Now, I also went into a lot of detail regarding Dr. Cook's study and why it's biased. First of all, he only sources himself and one other source, which isn't a conclusive study at all. For example, if I handed in a paper to my professor, a research paper with that few sources, I would fail. So it's not legitimate, and it's one of the main things he uses to market his products in the first place. So he needed the study to come out in a manner that would reflect his product well. So regardless of what was going to happen, they're not going to produce results that would make bitless look like it's not the better choice because he's marketing a product. It's a biased study. And on top of this, the judge that helps with the studies was shown the experiment prior to the judging process, which introduces further bias, and that same judge still uses bits. So clearly the judge didn't view the study as conclusive enough to swap from bitted to bitless. So anyways, citing that study as a conclusive reason for why riding in a bit is bad is really stupid, and then the anti-bit effects of the bit video is also stupid because it only focuses on one type of bit. The bit is improperly placed in the mouth, and even if it weren't, it only focuses on the single broken snaffle, which is one of many types of mouthpieces. So it's not a conclusive thing for saying why all bits are bad anyways, and it also has the bit in the wrong place, so that writes it off right off the bat. So another thing I wanted to touch on is people saying that everyone who uses a bit thinks that their bit is God. That's one of the stupidest things I have ever heard people say, because it's pretty ironic, because I actually think it's the opposite. Most people who use a bit know that it can be misused and cause pain, whereas a lot of the bitless people are insistent that there is no way that they could possibly cause pain if they're riding bitless. So I think the God complex is more frequently seen in bitless people. So anyways, the God complex argument is a funny one because no one thinks that a bit is God. Like, okay, most people don't, but bitless people seem to think that they're the be all and end all and that there's no possible way they could cause pain. A lot of them say that. So I think the God complex is more frequently seen there because they're insistent that there's no way they could possibly be causing pain no matter how they use their bitless option, which is really concerning and not okay. Another thing I wanted to touch on, especially when people target me and say that I should not be riding in a bit, is that both of my horses can be ridden bitted, bitless, and bridle-less. So in my opinion, if you're going to target someone with your anti-bit brigade argument, you better make sure that you can also ride bridle-less, because if you're using any form of pressure and relying on that for control, then your horse isn't as soft as a horse that can be ridden bridle-less, bitless, and bitted. So since I can do that with all of my horses, and that's something that I focus on training all of them and get them to the point where they can do that, I would say that my horses are softer than the average bitless horse and are more responsive. So there's a higher degree of training there, and they rely a lot less on pressure on their face or in their mouth for control because I train them neck reining cues. So for someone to say that they're better because they ride in a hackamore or other bitless options is pretty ridiculous when my horses are softer and more responsive with or without a bit or a bridle. So I think that's something that everyone should focus on doing, is getting your horse soft to the point where they can respond mostly off of seat and leg cues and neck reining cues and don't need the pressure on their face or in their mouth to be responsive. Okay, and this is the other bit that I use on my horses. It's a Mullenmouth truss bit. Again, there's some shoe marks, so I'm going to need to replace this one soon. But it's a completely soft rubber bit. Like, look, I can basically bend it in half. And again, this couldn't have the nutcracker effect like they were showing in that video, and it's also super soft on the mouth. It uses a lot of tongue pressure, and even when it is on the bars of the mouth, it's like a super soft rubber, so it's unlikely to cause pain. This is like the type of bit that I think they should use on lesson horses if they are going to ride them bitless. I mean bitted. But yeah, and then this is another bit that I used. It's a harder plastic, so I don't really use it anymore. I didn't love it. I got the softer rubber one, the black one that I showed you. But this is another one, and again, it can't have the nutcracker effect like they were demonstrating in that video because it's so collapsible. I personally don't like riding in single jointed bits, so most of mine are Mullenmouths or these ones. I think I've gotten rid of all of my single jointed bits. So anyways, I would say all of my snaffles are less harsh than a hackamore or even the cross under bitless Dr. Cook bridle because they don't have shanks. The hackamore shanks add further pressure. I wouldn't ride either of my horses in a hackamore. It's simply too harsh for them. And for the cross under bitless bridle, it's also too harsh because the pressure just is too much under their chins, and I know they wouldn't like that. So if I do ride them bitless, I just ride in a side pull or a rope halter or something like that. I don't really like hackamores or the cross under bitless bridle because I do think that they're quite harsh in terms of bitless options. If I was going to ride completely bitless, I would personally pick something else. I would only use use a hackamore on a horse that's pretty strong. So I don't really like hackamores because they're pretty harsh and they can be misused. I would definitely never ever recommend putting one in the hands of a beginning rider. And obviously if they are improperly fitted, they can cause a lot of damage. The cartilage and little nasal bones on the nose are really easy to damage, and I think we need to be really careful about that. For example, a couple of months ago, Milo freaked out and pulled back, and he was trying to get loose, and we couldn't have him getting loose because he could run around and hurt his leg. This was in the middle of his rehab, and he was wearing a rope halter, and he pulled back so much that it actually caused some swelling and minor soft tissue damage on his nose, and that was just with a rope halter with limited knots, so it's not as abrasive as other rope halters, and it still caused some problems and some swelling and some soreness on his face. And if that were a hackamore that he was pulling back on, it could have been much worse, especially if it was improperly fitted. So I really caution you about using those and what type of rider you put in those, and do not think that they're soft. They also have the curb chain underneath the chin, and it's more harsh. So again, if you're looking for a soft bitless option, I would recommend like a side pull. You could rig the Micklem bridle to be a nice really soft bitless option. It just works as a side pull, so I'd recommend that over those ones. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of either of those. But anyways, I don't want this to come off as hate, and it really shouldn't, because none of this is hate. I'm only talking about how she presented the study and the way in which she's coming off to her fans and how I think that it's wrong. I think it's really important that we realize how biased studies can be, and I think it's really important that people realize how many sources an actual credible study needs to have. And at this time, there's realistically nothing on either side that you can conclusively look at and be like, there's absolutely no way that this can be misused, it's not abusive, this can't cause pain. There's nothing on either side. There's virtually no studies done on bitless to see the damage that they can cause, and there's no focus studies on them in the same way. And I've personally noticed that a lot more people are focused on labeling bits as being abusive than bitless, so that's why you're seeing more of the bad parts of bitted riding being showcased. And I think that it's really dangerous for people to think that there's absolutely no way they can harm their horse if they're riding bitless, even if they don't fit things properly, because you can harm your horse with just about anything you use, ever. Like even a pitchfork or a hay net or something that's completely harmless, it can cause harm to your horses. So making it out to be that something's completely harmless and will never do anything bad is wrong, and I think we need to be careful of that. And also, with that said, I think people are way more, I think people jump on the bitless bandwagon way more, and they're more likely to see things as abusive with bits even when they're not. For example, in that video of Milo bucking and freaking out about the chicken, I had several people say that I was ripping on his mouth and that he was only bucking because of that, despite the fact that he's bridle-less in that video. So I think that kind of says how focused people are on trying to vilify bits and make out any misbehavior to be because of the bit, when there's a lot of other things that could go into any given misbehavior or even pain responses. There can be other things that cause them. And there's also horses that exhibit those very same responses bitless, but people who are pro-bitless kind of just choose to ignore them because they want their argument to be conclusive, and they kind of want to make it out to be that bitless can never be bad. And I think that's wrong, and we shouldn't be like that. We need to be aware that both can be bad, and we need to watch our horses and learn about equine behavior and be able to watch for any pain responses and know our horses well enough to know when something's not right or if they're fighting something and fix it. We need to tailor everything to the individual horse, and I don't really think it's fair for anyone to try and act like they're the best and they know everything and that they're making the most ethical decisions for their horse, especially when that person chooses a harsher bitless option to ride in. So it's not really fair for someone like that to be attacking people for riding in snaffles and other soft options, especially when she shows that she's absolutely unaware that she can ever cause pain using those options. And telling people that with a misfitted bitless bridle that you can never cause pain, that is super dangerous. Please don't listen to that and educate yourselves, and please realize that credible studies do not only have 2 sources, they're not only 4 pages long, and they're not done for companies by the person running the company and profiting off of the product they're selling. So Dr. Cook's bitless study is not credible. We cannot use that as a conclusive study. End of story. Scout LaRue just wants you guys to know that. And she wants you guys to do your homework and your research and learn about what credible studies are. Because Scout LaRue wouldn't believe a study with only 2 sources, especially when her owner has to have way more sources than that in her student research papers. Stop interrupting me.
Very loud today.
Stop interrupting. Unless you're gonna come on my lap.